Welcome back to the show. I'm so excited to be chatting with my guest, Jen, today. So, Jen, would love to have you start off by telling us who you are and what you do in the events industry.
Yeah, so I'm Jen Santos. I've been in the events industry for going on almost 15 years now, which feels somewhat unreal. And I work on the event tech side of the events industry. So I'm the person that's putting together the mobile apps for your events and doing registration and CMSs and your attendee websites and working on all those integrations. So that's my event tech background. But I've kind of like been shifting over because what I realize is a lot of time event tech gets a lot of shade, but the problem generally actually isn't the event tech. It's actually kind of the people and the processes around events. So as I've been going through my event tech and event journey, I've been looking more at the people and processes side of things and realizing that there's a lot that we can do generally in the events industry to honestly not constantly burn ourselves out. But I always come at it from the lens of event tech.
Yeah, and I mean, my career has been spent a lot of times working in software, not on the event tech side, but like working as an event planner in software. And yes, there are bad products out there, but most products are not bad. Most products actually do like 99% of what they say they're going to do, what you need them to do, but it's user adoption. Like I worked at a company that we sold a product that they basically made look like another product because they couldn't get people to stop using the other product. And it was just like a comfort thing. And change management is hard, right? That
Yeah.
is the biggest challenge that comes with any kind of tech, whether it's event tech or martech or analytic, like whatever it is. You all of a sudden you tell people, oh, you have to do, like I was on a team once where we implemented a project management tool. Oh my goodness. Like I was also at a company that switched from IBM Linus email to Outlook, which I mean, it was 2018 and I
Yeah.
did not know that that was a thing. Like I knew that it was a thing that people had used in the olden days of the
Right.
internet,
Right.
but it was a huge thing. And like all the people kind of Gen X and younger were like, oh my God, like finally, like I can't believe I had to learn how to use this system. And the people older were like freaking out because for some of them, it had been the only email client they had used in a workplace, right? So
Right.
that change management is such a huge part of like why software projects fail or successful, right? It's having that managed from the beginning.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I remember Lotus Notes, so going way back in time. But anyway, enough of the olden days, as they would call it, right? But like, I think about like event tech, and there's like two sides to this adoption side of it, right? There's like the planner side of it, and picking the right tool for us as the behind the scenes back of house people to use and making sure that we're matching the tools to the skill set of the people doing it, right? Like you've got a rain focus, which is an unbelievably complex enterprise tool, right? And then you got the other end of like Eventbrite, right? They both technically serve events, but they're radically different tools that are meant for different events, but different audiences as well. And so there's like these, I like the word enablement. And there's
Mhm.
like this enablement for our teams that are actually doing the configuration, our content teams, our exhibitor teams, making sure our ERCs are friendly for our exhibitors and they know how to use that. And there's making sure that they have the proper training that can follow them through the entire event lifecycle. The same thing, like when we're standing up stuff for our field marketers, making sure that we have a tool that can not only they can understand how to use it, but that is scaled and configured appropriately for their events. And those are radically different requirements. That's like half of it that I don't think tends to get enough credit and get looked at seriously enough during the selection process, unfortunately. You know, well, you should just use this because it's the best. Okay. Can your team support it? No. Well, okay.
Or use this because it's the cheapest.
Or
It's
use it because it's the cheapest, right? It's either the best or the cheapest,
yeah.
and without doing actually a proper assessment. And I could actually go on and on and on about the downsides of picking the cheapest, but that's a whole different podcast episode. And then there's actually the right tool for our end users. So, right, and making sure that we also meet those needs. So I do a lot of tech events, for example, right, with a lot of the big kind of household name tech companies. And so, they have one set of expectations, right? They're looking for like bleeding edge technology. They're looking for the latest and greatest. They want AI integrated into their tools. I just got back from CES. You can imagine the expectations that that group has. And then you go into like non CES trade shows, or you go into a lot of like continuing education programs, a lot of associations. They're a little further behind. I've talked to some of those people and they talk about like the silver tsunami that's coming, which is where they've got a lot of an older audience that literally still wants paper, and so those are two very different sets of requirements for what we need to provide to our attendees. If we give them this flashy app and they don't really, like, my musician husband can barely manage logging into something, like that's not going to be the right tool for him. He needs paper,
Yeah.
you know?
And I think it's also like you kind of talked a little bit about, the resourcing of the tech, but I think that's also one of the things of, okay, you're looking at an event app or registration tool or whatever the tech is, or whatever it is that you're trying to like put into your event. And you have to ask yourself, like, do we honestly have the resources to use this properly? Like, do we have the resources to take full advantage of all these features? Like, it's great that it has the capability for people to connect and sponsors and push notifications and like all these other things. But if at the end of the day, no one has time to set up those push notifications, if no one has time to like make sure that the sponsor like section of your app looks great, then it's all just wasted money. Like I was commenting on a post on LinkedIn the other day about registration tools, like kind of related to a previous episode, but also like surveys of like, why are you asking about something that you're not going to change, right? And like, so why are you getting event tech? Because, oh, we need to have an app. Well, okay, yes, probably, but are you going to have the hours to set in to make that app like something that people are actually going to want to download and doesn't just have the agenda that I can get online?
Right. Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot lately. So I was just recording some videos for a course that I'm building, and that was one of the big things I talked about, right? Because at the end of the day, an app's a tool. It is a tool to communicate information. So what information do you need to communicate, or what is the objective of this tool? Because honestly, like you talked about agenda, if it's just an agenda, let's put a QR code and let people scan it on their phones, right? Like, let's not go through all the work of building out a mobile app when all people need is an agenda. If we're starting to talk networking and that's something that makes sense, and we have the right registration questions that can support effective networking, which is something I don't see looked at enough a lot of times. It kind of comes down, oh, we should have attendee networking. Well, great. What profile questions do we have that's going to make this useful, right? Well, we got name and company. Okay. So that's not helpful. But it's like, what is the purpose? If you want a mobile app, what problem does it solve that can't be solved by different tools? No. Do you have the resources to support it? That is super important.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And so when you've been working with teams that are, going through either like, yeah, I see it like, yes, on the event tech side, but also on like as groups mature, right? Like I've worked
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of startup to scale up companies. Like I have some clients that I'm working with right now that are definitely in the startup phase and are just now exploring like formal events that aren't just them meeting in their office on a Thursday around beers, right? Like they're like
Right.
trying to plan out, okay, how do we do this in a more effective way, in a way that like feels different than it's just our like weekly sitting in the office or Zoom call or whatever. So when you're working with teams, like how are you helping them resource or figure out what resources they need, how to prioritize like a scaling kind of event program or like
Yeah. Well, this sounds really stupid because I see this talked about on LinkedIn all the time, which is why I say that. But like, what is the goal of the event? I mean, you have to start there. It's back to this idea of strategic alignment. And there are so many reasons an organization can hold an event, whatever type of organization. Maybe you actually are doing it to make money. Maybe you're, like you're a CES, so you're there to like help launch products and like set the direction for an industry. Maybe you want to, you're a lot of these corporate events, they're really there to like train up people and to help, move pipeline along. It's brand recognition, it can be advocacy. I mean, there's a million reasons people can hold an event. So I think it all starts with understanding what the objectives of your event are And then I think like then you need to go, right? Because that's like the ROI. How you get return on investment. Investment is money, but it's also time, it's resources. If you're going to hold a corporate event and you need to bring in your industry experts as speaker, experts as speakers, those product experts have to create a speech, a session, which means that they're not working on the project they should be working on, right? And I think a lot of that can also get lost too in the planning process is
Hmm.
that we're asking people to put down their day jobs to work on these other things. And that is a huge investment of time. So it's about what is your ROI? So we start with the ROI. And then we kind of go and we look at the people side of it. It's like, okay, so this is the ROI. This is what we want out of it. With the people we have, understanding kind of the number of, I'm going to say hours for lack of a better term, available hours, and the skill set of our people, what can we realistically do that is going to let us get as close as we can to our ROI? So maybe that doesn't mean we're putting on a 5,000 person user conference, but instead we're doing a 200 person curated dinner, because what we're really trying to do is we're trying to move pipeline. And if we can get the right 200 people in the room, we can accomplish the same thing as a 5,000 person user conference. And so that's where strategy meets kind of the people side of things. And then I can't do anything without having the right processes in place.
Right.
And so, right, so then it's like building kind of like that knowledge base and building up your kind of just building up your muscle and building up your reps and getting a good set of standard operating procedures in place so that you can make that as repeatable as possible. So even if you have a small but mighty team, which is mostly what I run into, you can still do more with less without burning out your team.
Yeah. And it's a great that you mentioned like SOPs and building up that process, because I think that there's a like challenge within like events of not wanting to over process things, because then you're just rinsing and repeating, quote unquote. And so
Right.
understanding the difference between processes so that you're not pulling out your hair every time you're doing another trade show and you're like starting from scratch every single time, but also that you don't go to a show like there's some shows that I go to in every industry, like not just the events industry, like when I'm, working with clients or in previous roles, there are certain companies that I know exactly what their booth is going to look like. I know exactly like what they're all going to be wearing. I know exactly what their social is going to look like, right? So yes, you need some of those repeatable things so that you're not burning it all down and starting all over
Yeah.
again. But how do you balance the need and effective SOPs and processes that one means that you're not having to re explain things to your field staff, so your sales team and your customer success people, but also that you're keeping things fresh and not getting too rinse and repeaty on the actual event?
Yeah. I love what you said at the beginning of that. I honestly had never crossed my mind what you just said about not wanting to become being sort of like allergic to SOPs because you don't want it to become too rinse and repeat. I, as like a techie process person, that never once crossed my mind until just now. And it makes perfect sense. And as you also said, right? Like, honestly, give me a run of show template so I just have to fill it out, right? Like, give me templates so I just have to fill them out. Let's create standard, again, being on the tech side, but let's fill out let's have a template for our requirements. Let's have all these templates so that we can just take as much of the useful stuff forward, because like events year over year are not blowing up all their attendee types to start over. They're just not when you think about registration, right? A lot of times they're going back to the same venue because they've found the venue that works for them. So the floor plans, they already know what the floor plans are. They've already probably optimized their expo to a certain extent, right? Like, let's pick up the pieces that do make sense to rinse and repeat. And then that gives us the space and the energy to do the surprise and delight elements and to
Hmm.
bring in the fresh, because the boring part has become so boring and rinse and repeat that we don't have to spend brain space in there. And I feel like that's kind of like where, again, creatives are a little allergic to that because that's not where they thrive. And I completely get it. I
Yeah.
thrive there.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's kind of explaining to your stakeholders the way that you just said it is that we're let's call it automating because people love that, right? Like, oh,
Yeah.
we're automating the boring stuff so that we can focus on the experience and focus on improving the experience so that we're not rewriting it every single time. Like I've worked with probably hundreds of salespeople at this point who are traveling all over North America going to shows. Like, I want them to know exactly where they can find their hotel confirmation and their flight information and the show hours all in one place so that I'm saving myself questions in Slack that, I mean, I'll probably still get some of them where I'll say, remember that thing that we do every time you
Yep.
go to an event? It's right there.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
And that takes some time. And I think, you know, we talked a little bit about that change management. Like, I've worked in organizations where the reps would be like, "Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Like, I'll get it into HubSpot. I'll get it into Salesforce, or yeah, yeah, yeah. Like, it's fine. Like, I know it." And I remember one time we like cut a reps like events. Like, there was a bunch of events. It was a very like geo focused territories, and we cut a bunch of his events, and he was like really upset. And I'm like, "Well, they didn't perform last year. Like, there's no leads. There's no this. There's no like touch points." He's like, "Yeah, but I'll just tell you which ones are the ones to go to." And I'm like, "We have 80 events on the calendar. You think I'm going to every sales rep and asking them their opinion? No. Put it in HubSpot." And sure enough, he did. They all hated the form when it first happened, but then they realized, that's how I get more money invested into my territory, because if you showed me that you could work an event and bring in revenue, then yeah, I'm going to invest more. I'm going to give you the cooler activation in the booth. I'm going to do more offsites because you've shown that there's the return there. I can't do it if you're just like, "Oh, it's in my brain." I'm like, great. Then your brain can keep your activations.
Your brain's going to write that check to us. That's wonderful. So, right?
Yeah, it's really like, I think it's sometimes you have to hold them accountable with consequences, right? And I think that so often, we want, as event planners, like, we're trying to not be people pleasers, but a bit people pleasers, right? Like, we want everyone to have a good experience. We want everyone to be invested in the event. Like, we know, like, yes, obviously event planners put a lot of work into it, but they can't happen without your sales reps, without your customer success people, without your subject matter experts, your execs, like whoever it is going and representing the company on site. Like, you need their buy-in as well. And sometimes the way to get buy-in is it like more less carrot, more stick, or
Yeah.
like,
No, exactly, right? Like I recently wrapped up an event series and they've been trying going back to the tech side of things because that's my lens. But we'd had a couple of events that had kind of some hiccups because the organization as a whole hadn't been wanting to make the investment in the event tech, and eventually it caught up with us, right? And so it was kind of like the case of the stick. It's like, okay, like we knew we needed this, and we sort of avoided doing it, kind of like your sales reps. They didn't want to put the work in this case, the company didn't want to make the financial investment until it caught up with him. And then we're like, okay, like we now need to step back. We need to make the financial investment so that we can ensure that we have a good on-site experience for our attendees.
yeah. And I mean, it's the thing with the cars, right? Like, if you have a car that like you want to keep on the road for a long time, you can't neglect it. You've got to get its oil changes. You've got to get, when the engine light comes on, you have to let it go. And I'm sure my husband will hear this and laugh because he knows that I'm really bad at those things. I'm like, no, no, it's fine. Like, it's fine. The light just came on. It's fine. But you have to be doing that maintenance along the whole event process, and not just like kind of look back 5 years into an event program and be like, oh, like, we're wasting money, or we're not maximizing this, or how much time are we wasting? Like, I've worked in organizations without like proper booth management. And so it's like, okay, now the event reps are like, event managers are having to find a new way to do it every single time. And so it's like, yeah, okay, maybe it's cheaper than paying an expensive exhibit house, but is it, right? And like, is anyone
Right.
actually doing that cost analysis, right? And I think that's what I was, thinking about with like scaling, right? Of things that work when you're, a $5 million company may not work when you're a $10 million company, certainly don't work when you're a $50 million company. And like, as you keep scaling that, you do have to keep reevaluating, like, okay, are the tools, and I'm not for ripping out every tool all the time, and like having been on multiple project management like tool changes, like I have my favorites, but I can also figure out how to use other ones.
Right.
And I think it's really making sure that you're having that conversation every year of, okay, is this still serving us? Like, and sometimes it's maybe like, actually, we're not getting great uptake on the app, or we're, you know, we are, but only for this one thing. Okay, well, is an app still the best way to do that? And I'm kind of picking on apps because it's like the most like attendee focused
Yep.
item, but it's like, okay, is this the most reasonable way of doing this? And sometimes it's like over complicating it. Like there's some apps that it's like, oh, okay, this is just for your sales team. And it's like, okay, but they're going to their calendar, they're going to Slack. Like
Right.
they're not downloading another thing, right? So
Yep.
just because it can do it doesn't mean you should.
Yeah. Well, and that kind of goes back to, again, going back to my processes, this idea of thinking of events operationally and like
Mhm.
operational maintenance, and looking at it from a year-round perspective is like, okay, like we just ran our big annual event, we need to do a proper debrief, not just like, oh, thank God that's over, here are the stats for the executive deck, but it's actually doing that deep dive into seeing like what elements really worked, what elements didn't work, and then surmising why didn't they work. Did they work because they weren't promoted well enough, people didn't know about them, or they were just something attendees flat out don't want? Any, it can be any or all of those things, so you need to kind of make an intelligent guess about it. But it's looking at, even if you only do one big event a year, it's looking at it kind of like year round. So you have your event and taking that full event life cycle, and guess what, the event doesn't end even 2 weeks after the debrief, right? Like at that point, like for example, I mentioned CES, right? Guess what, in 2 weeks we're starting 2027 planning. Like that's, like it's, there is no kind of like downtime. You need to sit there and start looking way in advance to get the processes in place. But that's also why these SOPs are just so ridiculously important, because that way you're like, okay, this is the post-show reporting we need, these are the types of details that we need in order to make the right decision to make next year's show or next cycle's show that much stronger.
Yeah, and there's something to be said about writing your debrief, even just like on your like notes on your phone while you're
Mm-hmm.
going, because
Yep.
there's so many things that I've gone back to. Like, sometimes we're starting planning like 6 months out. So it's been 6 months since the last event, and then we're
Oh yeah.
like kind of digging in deep on the like
Yep.
within 6 months. I mean, sometimes less, sometimes more. You know how it goes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
It depends.
right. But there's sometimes that I go back and look at things and I'm like, yeah, I remember
Uh-huh.
hating that thing,
Yep.
whether it was like a piece of tech or a layout thing or, a flow thing. Like there was just like something weird on
Yep.
site that immediately left my brain once it was done because it wasn't annoying me anymore. But I made those notes, had something to refer to, and then also had the, backup, I'll call it, when you get asked, well, why aren't we using this again? Why aren't we going back to that venue? Or why are we like changing this format? Why are we adding more breaks or more breakouts or whatever it is? You can go back and say, well, the survey data showed us this. This was the feedback we received from employees like on site. This is the feedback we had from like observing, like people were literally running in between sessions, right?
Yep.
So how do you kind of use those and operating like getting like a standard operating procedure around that as well, so that
Yep.
the next year you can, it's not just a document that doesn't help you next year because no one knows that it exists or what it is. Like I've known some who've done like, stop start continue, and you'll figure out whatever like your best format for it is, but it's there to help you inform those decisions, communicate better to your stakeholders about things that you're either going to keep the same. Like, so maybe it's that everyone says we need more keynote time, but actually attendees are showing us they like the number of breakouts, right? And so, like,
Right.
let's keep it that way because that's what they're finding valuable. And so, like, changing that is only serving our purposes, right?
Right. Yeah. I actually I love doing exactly what you talked about, which is building like my debrief while the event is happening, because event
Yeah.
amnesia is real. Like,
Yeah.
right? Like literally, like you said, like you shut the door, you've completely forgotten that that layout did not work, or that this is this weird bug. And so like I do that. I start like once the event starts going, I have like my notes and I send it out to my team. And I'm like, here's my initial thoughts. Please add to it. Put your initials in it. And then I didn't always do this. I had to learn this the hard way. Examples, right? Like a specific example. So like me, it's almost always data. It's like, well, this exhibitor, blah, blah, blah. And, and then I can actually go back into last year's data. And I could be like, oh, that was the configuration that totally screwed us up. Because you swear you're not going to forget it because it was so painful. And
Right.
yet, 2 weeks later, you will have no idea what that was about. And so I would say, don't just include the what, include the why. And then, like, give a really good example or four. Because you are going to forget. And then you see the data, you're like, oh, yeah, that was that thing. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah. Especially when you do a lot, right? Like
Yes.
maybe I've never worked in a company where I've only done one event. Oh my gosh,
No.
that would be what? Like I don't think I know what to do with myself to be
No,
honest.
I know, right? Yeah.
I get that there are some events that are just that big that that's all you
Yeah.
can work on. But like most programs I've worked on have been like 50, 80 program. And so you're like,
Yeah.
you're barely finishing the one that you're in
No.
before you're like trying to troubleshoot the next one, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly. I'm like, what city was that? Or I think that sounds vaguely familiar. Like, you just have to have the notes that you have to do while you're going. And particularly, like, you're the same thing, right? You're jumping between client to client to client as well. And so you're like, oh, sorry, I wasn't supposed to say that because that was a company, right? Like, there's that thing too that can happen if you're not really careful and if you don't keep really good notes.
yeah, and it's also just like yeah, it's definitely making it easier on yourself going forward, finding those things like I love that's going to be my like it's the title of the episode is like make the boring things repeatable and then you can focus on the fun, right? And that I think is really what it comes down to is that people who aren't process driven or aren't data driven are like, oh, that's the boring stuff. And it's like, no, like that's actually where it can be fun because it like frees up your brain to do so many other things,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
great.
And I think
But
that's like a lot where I'm really curious to see what happens with generative AI in like the next 6-12 months in this regard, because I think it can help us with a lot of these boring pieces. And I'm starting to see that with like event focused products in this space coming out. And I think like, I mean, I get a little worried about our jobs. I won't lie, particularly for like junior planners, right? That tend to get a lot of that quote unquote grunt work passed off onto them. But I think it's going to be really exciting to see how it can help us just to like help get rid of the boring, get rid of the repeatable boring, or automate it even further so that we can do focus on the connection, focus on the surprise and delight, focus on making our events even more meaningful.
yeah, for sure, for sure. I have a theory that AI is going to replace the jobs that no one's doing anyways. So the personalizations and pre-calls to your attendees
Mm-hmm.
and super detailed like experiences that are tailored for like a mass event that we just can't do with people because we don't
Yeah.
have the time or the resources. Like I feel like that's where it's going to really augment that personalization, that custom experience and that like elevated experience for attendees.
Oh, I love that. I hope you are right because that would be incredible.
I hope so too. That's a perfect place to wrap up. Thank you so much, Jen, for being on the show. Tell us where can people find out more about the work that you do and connect with you further.
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn basically every day. Jen Santos or Jen Walk Santos is how you can find me over on LinkedIn. And then I have a website, Smart Event Academy, where that's where kind of like my actual event planning business and where I like to work with organizations to help them deliver smarter events.
Amazing. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.